What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we have a bit of a different guest. He's a martial artist, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, as we pretty much always have a guest on, similar to that. But he's also a history professor. If you guys know me, if you've been around me long enough or listened to podcasts, you may have gotten an inkling that I'm a history geek. That's when I read books. I typically have multiple books going. I'll have, my sort of business related book, something for self-development of some sort, and then there's almost always a history book. My history book is it's my fun book. It's the book that I read for my own enjoyment. I typically read that at night. That's the stuff I read for fun, just because I find it very interesting and fascinating. And today's on the podcast, and I'm going to butcher his name a little bit, but it's Daniele Bolelli.
It's pretty good. Well done.
I want to, like, when I say it, I want to say it with, like, because he's from Italy, and I want to say it like, as like what I would imagine is a American from Kentucky listening to a stereotypical Italian person, like Daniele Bolelli. That's what I imagine it as.
Not too bad.
Yeah, thank you. But no, so he's on the podcast. So he has a really cool podcast himself called
History
on Fire. Yeah, and he has another one called The Drunken Taoist. But again, with that said, he's also a history professor and all that stuff, and he's a martial artist. So we're going to talk to him today. And again, the podcast will be maybe a little different than the usual, just pure jiu-jitsu talk, which I think is fun. I think you guys will enjoy it. But there's definitely some cool little nuggets of information that he shares about other subjects that, again, may be of interest to you. So
we talk about Bruce Lee. He's done quite a bit of research on Bruce Lee. So that was, for me, it was like a huge interest. So it was fun.
Yeah. Well, the Bruce Lee part was interesting because I didn't know that about Bruce Lee. And so hearing that, I'm like, huh. Yeah. And it's just a thought-provoking thing to consider when all of us are, on our grinds, so to speak.
Correct.
So, leave it at that and let you guys listen to it so you can hear what he says. But again, thank you guys for being here and sharing your most precious resource, which is your time.
That's right.
Appreciate you guys. And as always, thanks to our sponsors for helping make the show possible. Charlotte's Web. charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 to save 20% off on the order. Again, you guys know, if you listen to the podcast, I'm a huge fan of their products. I think they make terrific products. Been out there, we've seen the farms. I've been using their CBD oil for over 2 years now, probably getting closer to 3. Mm-hmm. And again, I was talking to my students this morning about it because they sent me a package to sort of put up and display at the gym for free samples. So I'm going to let the students try. I like to give them out free samples. But it's one of these things where, it's FDA, it's not FDA approved. So there's so many things where, like, you can't talk about stuff. But if you just go through and look at, like, the anecdotal experiences of lots of people, you'll probably see certain trends. Like, for me, I take it before bed because there is a discernible difference in the sort of quality of my sleep cycles when I'm using CBD. When I give it to my students, almost always they come back to me and say, man, that was awesome. Like, which product should I buy, on their website? Or whatever. It's almost always a good response. Now, there are people that have used it and said, nah, I didn't really feel anything. That happens too, but I encourage everybody with any supplement to try it out for themselves. It's like with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is not for everyone. You might do it. You might love it. You might try to get your friend to do it. And he's like, bro, this isn't for me. I'm not rolling around with a grown man sweating all over me in pajamas. Not doing it. Right. But either way, you got to figure out what works for you. And so I encourage you guys, if you've ever heard about it, if you've been interested in trying it, again, it's a really cool product. Check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20. Pick out one of the tinctures, one of the oils, try it out for a month, see how it works for you, and see what kind of effect you get on it. Also, thanks to Epic Roll for making the podcast help make it happen. Having trouble speaking there a little bit, but we're going to keep rolling with it. But again, epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. Matt, who is the person that runs Epic Roll, makes a lot of terrific products, everything from shirts, rash guards, shorts, gis, gym bags, the whole thing. And a lot of times, if you see me on my YouTube videos or if you see me in pictures and things like that, if I've got some kind of cool, like, jiu-jitsu related shirt that's not my own, it's probably his. Mm-hmm. Like the other day, I posted a picture. I did a video in the Kimura shirt. So basically, it has Kimura. It looks like Webster's dictionary sort of thing. It's got Kimura, and then it's got like the definition of what it is underneath of it. And it's a cool shirt. And I like wearing those shirts anyway, just because people look at them, they start reading, and you, like, when you go in the supermarket, people are staring like, what is a Kimura? I'm in Kentucky, so some people have accents. What's that Kimura? I don't know what that is. But then, but again,
Just stereotype all us Kentuckians, don't you, Chewy?
huh?
I'm kidding.
That's right. That's right. Hey, to be fair, that's how some of them sound.
It is.
Man, I'm gonna put him in old Kimura. I want that old Kimura. I'm gonna put him in omoplata.
I like the omoplata.
But again, I like his stuff. And so if you're interested in any jiu-jitsu gear or merch or t-shirts and shorts, that kind of stuff, check them out. EpicRollBJJ.com. Promo code is jiu-jitsu for 15% off. Cool products, quality products. And I also really love the designs. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. So guys, in jiu-jitsu, we understand that there's this kind of idea where like when you train, you understand that like you put in these little daily training sessions, and each one of those training sessions, I always view it like this. It's almost like a drop in the bucket, right? In that little drop in the bucket, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But let's say you've got that bucket sitting under a faucet. Overnight, eventually that bucket's going to be overflowing with water, right? And a lot of times this is how our jiu-jitsu happens, where we come in and we're training and we're overwhelmed by all the techniques and everything else. And again, every single training session is just one drop in the bucket, and they build up over time. And then it happens like this very slowly, where maybe 5 years down the road, you look back and you can't even imagine how you got so good at jiu-jitsu because you kept training consistently. Well, there's a really cool app that has become a sponsor to the podcast. I think they're doing something that's really cool. It's called Acorns. You can check them out at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. And basically, here's what they do. They set it up to where your spare change goes into your investments. So basically, every time you make a purchase with your credit, your debit card, a little portion of the change, right, just basically rounds up, goes into the investments that you set up on their website. And it's really cool because this does a couple things. One is it basically just makes it automatic. You don't have to think about it, but it also gets rid of this idea, because this happens in jiu-jitsu where people think that they have to do these big, grand things to be good at jiu-jitsu. And in reality, it's very simple. You just got to like keep training consistently. And with investments, it's a lot of times the same way. Investments very much are like a little drop in the bucket. And so every time you make a purchase, you're making a drop in the bucket, so to speak, towards your future and towards your investments. And so every time you make a purchase, it just puts a little bit of your change in there and it goes to your investments. You can also set it up to where every time you get paid, it puts a chunk of that money into your investments automatically. And again, they've got a really cool offer going on right now, which is if you invest $5 using the Acorns app at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu, so $5, you get $20 bonus to invest. So by you putting in 5, you get 20 back to then put into whatever you want to get started. And then you can start using the app afterwards. And again, something that Eugene and I keep thinking about is like, basically it's like spare change, right? And imagine if you could take all the change that has been lost in the couch cushions and the sides of car seats and everything else, and you could have taken that money over the years from purchases and put it towards investments. How much money would you have saved up by now, right? So it's a pretty important thing. And so they get rid of the barrier. They make it very simple, and you can check them out again at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com. And guys, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can also do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. In addition to all the content that we've been adding, we do a green room, which is basically it's a live chat where you can hang out with Eugene and I and chat live before one of the podcasts. But again, in addition to that, we have a little chunk of every podcast with some actionable tip that you can implement into your jiu-jitsu from some of the guests that we've had. And then if it's not that, sometimes it's just a little behind the scenes stuff. If you guys like the podcast, it's a little bit more of that. And again, there's different tiers. So it's relatively inexpensive and you can cancel it anytime. But if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast to get more info. And guys, last but not least, if you would like to join my Chew Crew email list, I send out a daily email, usually Monday through Friday, occasionally on the weekends. And I try to make them entertaining, pack them with some different tips and ideas. Sometimes it could be some books that I'm reading or some ideas from the stuff that I'm reading. Other times it's like a story of some person that, was in the gym, and I give you an idea that you can take away for your own jiu-jitsu. And sometimes I just make fun of stupid comments from YouTube because I get some of those, and those are fun.
Great.
Those are fun. It's fun to like take one, like some crazy comment about something like, someone saying I need to streamline my body, and then
you should
just like, let's have fun with this. I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what it means either. Just go with it, Chewy.
But I'm rolling with it. So, every day I'm in the gym lifting weights and trying to get streamlined. But if you guys would like to join the emails, you can do so by going to jujitsu.net/join. And by joining the Chew Crew email list, you'll get the daily email, but you'll also get access to 3 free ebooks that I give away for as a gift for joining. One is on Jiu-Jitsu game plans, so you can make your own game plan for Jiu-Jitsu, which is really important. One is on drilling strategies and sort of a philosophy on drilling and how to implement techniques, which I'm doing right now as I'm implementing a bunch of stuff from the Sean Williams seminar with the body lock passing. And then the last one is some at-home workouts and sort of some ideas on at-home studying for Jiu-Jitsu. I made this ebook originally for people during the quarantine when they weren't able to train. It's pretty beefy, lots of stuff in there. So some workouts and some ideas on studying at home. All of those are free for joining, and you can unsubscribe at any time. So check it out at jujitsu.net/join. And guys, I think that's it for all the sponsors and all that jazz. So with that said, let's jump into the podcast with Daniele.
So where did this, like kind of getting into it, where did this fascination with history come from for you? What was is it from a young age you kind of were interested in history, or kind of where did it come from and kind of turn into this career of a podcast and also becoming a professor?
I grew up, I was born in 1974. So I grew up in Italy at a time when there were maybe 3 TV channels. Most of them had nothing for kids other than half hour a day. So, there's no internet, there's really not much TV, there's not much of anything. So, sometimes you get a book and that's all I was an only child too. So, you spend a lot of time by yourself with whatever it is that you have in front of you. And I remember they got these books for me. They were pretty well done history books for kids where there were a lot of images. So for a kid, you can sort of lose yourself in that almost Where's Waldo kind of painting where you see all the characters, you see the city, you see what everybody's doing. And it was fun. It was like running movies in my head, right? I would start imagining, what does this guy do? What does this person in the market is doing? Oh, this one just stole something from the marketplace and it's been chased. But it's just a fun game, And then one of the things growing up that got me further into it, that the way I look at it, history gives us the key to understand human life more than anything, because anything that has ever happened is history, right? So we as individuals can only have so much life experience. History allows you to tap into the life experience of many, many, many other people. So you can test what has worked and what hasn't. You can see where good ideas have gone wrong, where something that didn't look that good actually turned out to be a great way to live. It's a great playground to just look at the possibilities out there and essentially test ideas against reality, so that you don't end up, bringing it to a martial arts thing. You don't end up being the guy who points his finger and think he can explode a chicken with his chi. But you actually have some reality to give you back some feedback, and you realize, okay, this was a good idea, but it really doesn't work for reason A, B, C, and D, and it happens so many times that clearly the idea is good until it meets reality. So if you want to bring it in reality, you have to tweak it.
With history over in, I guess I should go back. I'm not sure. How old were you when you came to the United States?
18.
So how is the history in sort of the earlier education in Italy? Because in America, it's awful. It's they take, for instance, I grew to like history as an adult. I loved it when I got my first college classes, and they're giving you this 3-dimensional view of these human beings where you get the good, the bad, and the ugly, and instead of just these mythical beings that they've shown throughout history in schools. What's the history like in Italy? Is it the same way where you get this sort of happy history narrative that you leave with?
It's not necessarily, maybe it's not as Disneyfied, but it's still dry.
Okay.
Like you don't get into what makes some of the characters really fascinating. You're like, oh, this guy was a politician who did this and this, and there's always that question of like, yeah, okay, who cares? How does that relate to me? How does that relate to life in the background? I think maybe it's by layers is a little bit better than the way it's done in US, but not dramatically better. It's
Okay.
maybe just couple of notches up, but not by a whole lot.
That when you came to the States, what was that? I was actually born in Russia, and I came when I was 6 years old. I came to the States when I was 6. So
Wow.
my educational, experience was, mainly here.
Yeah.
So when you kind of started transitioning in school and learning the language, kind of what were you drawn to in school? Was it like still history? Was there other things that interested you a lot?
So I would say that the beginning of my college life and the middle of my college life and my late college life, what interests me the most were very beautiful women.
I knew that's where you're going.
But other than that, no, I mean, it was a different system and I enjoy it. Was oddly, despite the language, which when I first moved here, I really struggled with the first few months,
Yeah.
but I started catching up quick, other than my accent. But I started catching up quick in terms of understanding what was going on and being able to
Yeah.
express myself. But I struggled a bit with, yeah, that was really the only struggle. The rest was easy. The rest, I felt that the way, I mean, I never enjoyed the school in Italy, but it was definitely it taught you how to study. You learn how to study well, you learn. So when I came to college here, I was like, oh man, this is easy. I don't have to do this. I know how to do this game. And I would see many people who were smart people, nice people, and they had no clue how to really sit down and study. And I was like, oh, they just were never taught really that well.
Mm,
And so I felt like, okay, that gives me an advantage. That makes
mm.
life 10 times easier. Like I never thought it was a great experience when I was in Italy, but then when I came here, I was like, okay, that prepared me for this stuff so much better than anything I could have hoped for.
So how did you study? What was your, what did you learn and how have you like applied that to, to school and even just to learning martial arts and other things? How did your explain to us kind of your strategy for studying?
So for one, it's kind of brutal in Italy. It's like they don't push you through the grades. You have, if you don't do well enough, you have to repeat the grade. And there's zero just like, oh, well, I guess let's just push it through. It's like I remember one year in high school, they do things differently there. They don't do, it's almost like grade school here where you stay with one class the whole time
Mhm.
and the professors rotate. So let's say my class was maybe 30 people when we started. By the end of the year, there were 18 because 12 were all being failed.
Wow.
And that was just 1 year, right? So there was a selection process. There was like the Wheel of Pain in Conan the Barbarian kind of thing, It's like learn how to study or don't, and we'll repeat, do 7 years of high school then, It's like, so it's one of the things where it's like a little bit sink or swim,
Oh,
which I don't necessarily recommend because it's not I was like 15, 16, and I would be stressing about school all the time. That's not a good way to go. At the same time, being a little bit rigorous definitely helps, forcing you to take things seriously, forcing you to figure out there is no plan B. I need to do well. Can I do well? How can I let me work on it more? But a lot of it deals with focus, because realistically, when we work, when we do anything, we half-ass it because we don't want to be there. So, you start something and you're like getting distracted and you check something else and you take 6 hours to do a job that could be done in hour and a half.
Mhm.
And so sometimes really and wasting so many days that way, where like you spend the whole day studying where you didn't get to have fun, you didn't get to do any of the things you wanted to do. So really then going back and like, okay, I cannot live this way. How can I be more efficient? How can I be just, okay, give me 45 minutes of crazy focus. Then when you lose it, take a 10-minute walk, go do some push-ups, do whatever, do something that recharges you for a bit, get back to work, give me another crazy focus 45 minutes, and we call it a day. And then you can go have fun. Easier
yeah.
said than done, but that's like emphasizing quality over quantity was key. And I feel that, I mean, even like if I had, if I hire people for a job, I don't want them to be in the office 8 hours a day. I don't give a crap. It's like go to the beach with your family. I don't care.
Mhm.
But by the end of the week, I need this done.
Yeah.
You get it done in 5 hours, good for you. You got
Right.
a full-time job for working minimally, but the quality has to be there. So I don't care how you make it happen. And I think that shifts things around where you're not just thinking anymore, oh, I'm glued to this crap that I have to do, and it's just this. No, it's like, look, when you finish, you're done. Go have fun, go play, just be efficient, work hard, and then take breaks. And I find that it was weird recently. I went with a trip with my family to Hawaii. You're in Hawaii, it's fantastic here, it's paradise all around. And so, of course, I'm not working much. And then I started looking after a week, and like in 2 hours a day I was working, I was getting more done than when I'm at home 10 hours a day in front of the computer.
Hmm.
And I was like, how is that even possible? It's like I'm spending all the time hanging out and having fun, and I'm getting more done. And I was like, oh, it's just the quality of the focus that I'm giving to something makes all the difference. And I was like, okay, there's something to be said about time. The famous 10,000 hours to master something. Sure. It's true, but the quality of those hours is dramatically different. Like 4,000 hours at insane focus are very different than 10,000 with half-ass focused.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing because, obviously with your podcast, I'm sure, through your podcast and your teaching and everything else, you probably have I'm sure you have, become sensitive to the feeling where you're just kind of tapped out. For me, like if I'm doing some like creative work where I'm doing a video or something like that, I can't explain it to anyone, but there's a point where like, after maybe 2.5 hours of really focused work, no distractions, no phone, no nothing, there's a point where your mind just stops clicking like it was, and I have to get away from it. And if I try to, and I found this out probably like you have too, where if you keep trying to push through it, you're just spinning the wheels, and like you might feel good from the standpoint of, oh, I put my hours in, but then when you get your results from it, you're like, I'm not happy with this at all. That's interesting.
Yeah, I feel that any kind of brainy intellectual type of work where you have to sit down and your body's still and it's just your mind working, I think doing it in hour chunks is the way to go. And an hour is just for me. Somebody else could go longer, somebody else go shorter, but like maximum focus. When you start seeing that you're getting diminishing results, that's when it's time to do something else. And for me, I found out that physical activity would work great. I would do like a 15-minute workout, and I would feel so just more awake after that. I would just suddenly feel like, everything is clicking again. Okay, I can sit down and put in another hour. I found that very useful for focus.
Yeah, the whenever I get ready to do some writing or do videos or whatever it is that I'm doing that requires me to actually think a lot. I don't know if you've got some other sort of like little rituals that you do. Mine, I'll typically either get a short like lifting workout in, or I'll get like a 30-minute, like 35-minute bike ride in. Not a super hard pace, but enough to get a good sweat in.
Perfect.
And then immediately after, have a little bit of food, and then I'll have my first cup of coffee in the morning. And then I lock all the doors, like turn my phone off, and like I'm dead to the world for the next 2 to 4 hours.
Perfect. I think that works great. And sometimes maybe, if you're going long, if you're going more for the 4 hours, maybe having a break in between where you take your 15 minutes and do another one of those things just to kind of reset and start again. I think that's important very much. And the rituals, I like that you said they are rituals, because that's what they are. And what are rituals designed to do? They are designed to reset. They are designed to bring you back to a place of comfort, of being centered, of being focused, of feeling good, where then they bring you to that place so you can be more effective, go out, do your thing. Now you're losing it a little. Let's recharge the batteries again.
So what was the goal with school? Like, did you know you wanted to be a history professor going in? You just kind of went at, and also like coming, I don't know why, maybe your family came to the States and stuff, but usually it's for that immigrant mentality is like, you got to go and get a good job or get a career, this type of thing. You got to be a lawyer. Usually it's like lawyer, doctor, or, dentist or something like that. So like, what was it for you? Was there like some family pressure did you feel, or you just kind of enjoyed once you got the hang of it, enjoyed going to school and then figured out what you loved?
I think really there were two primary motivations for me, and neither were academic. One were just meeting people, social life, because especially, in the Western world in general, in US in particular, it's really not that easy to, like, loneliness is one of the primary things that drives people crazy out here. because most people just don't have enough social interactions. They don't have enough friends. They don't have enough of a community around them. So especially when they get out of school. So universities are great for the social aspect, right? You get to meet other people your age. So that's primary. Second aspect, back then when I started college, which was in 92, Italy still had a mandatory military service, which was designed purely essentially as a way not to have a coup, because they did not want to have a bunch of like hardcore people leaning politically one way or another who are all innate to then can become. They wanted to have a bunch of people who don't want to be there for a year and essentially waste their year just so to bring the morale low enough that there is not.
That's crazy.
So that's what it was designed for, right? And I'm like, okay, I get it, but I really don't want to spend a year of my life doing essentially nothing because they park you around somewhere to waste your time for a year. So the way you can avoid it is as long as you're in school, you could avoid it. So I was like, I guess I'm doing college. Oh, I should do a master too, because I was like, I want to spend a year like that, and then eventually they even abolished it. Didn't do it in the process, but I was like, it was only kind of as I was going that I realized, you know what, I like chatting with people. I enjoy teaching. I feel that I'm pretty good at it. People seem to have fun with me. I enjoy the process. Getting paid to talk about stuff I enjoy, that's probably not the worst thing I could do.
It's pretty
So
cool,
I was
yeah.
like, I can do that. And, I can do other creative work on the side. But the problem with a lot of creative work is that it's very stressful because you never know if it's going to work or not. You write books. That's on a prayer. You do anything creative, a lot of it is on a prayer because it's not a regular gig. So I figure, okay, I can have something that covers my butt in terms of finances by teaching, at least at a base level. And then I can always do some stuff that I care even more about on the side and see if that hits or not, but without the financial pressure of, hey, unless I'm a success in the next 3 months, I'm screwed. And I like that balance, where it kept it. You don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially a creative one, where it's half of the time it's not even dependent on you. It's a lot of luck, a lot of people who's there to open a door for you. So I was like, I don't want to. That's way too stressful. So I have something that I enjoy because I do enjoy teaching and that pays the bills, and then I can play with these other projects and see what happens.
And it probably allows you with the podcast and all the other creative projects that you do to be very relaxed with them so that you don't have to go one way. You don't have to take sponsors on if you don't want to, or
Right.
you don't have to maybe bend to, say, the desires of a certain group of people because you're like, it's coming from a place that you want to create with it,
Yeah.
and you can have fun with it. There's no, as you said, there's no dependence on it.
Totally. And I think sometimes I put too much pressure on myself. And then it's always useful to remember exactly what you said, which is like, hey, man, relax. You're not going to go hungry tomorrow if you screw this up. If it doesn't work, you're still okay. You fall on your feet. So take it easy. It's fun. You chose to do it for fun, not because you have a gun to your head, So if you're very driven, it's easy to forget that.
Yeah.
So what you just said is a daily reminder that's useful to keep things in perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think going back to this idea always to do more, right? It's something that we all, especially we're in this creative community, right? Like, your podcast is very popular, and I make YouTube videos about jiu-jitsu stuff, right? And there's this thing where you start seeing progress, and it's very good because it's coming from this place inside of you that you're like, okay, I made this thing, and I'm very happy with it, and other people liked it. It's very gratifying. It's very cool. It's a very cool connection. But then there's like this worry where, let's say if you make something and it's not as well received as you would have liked, you have to fight with it. You got to remember, well, I made this because I'm this whole process and because I want to share with people or whatever. The results don't matter. I want them to be good, but if you get too dependent upon the results, then you get, again, it goes back to the always wanting more, and you've got to kind of take a step back from it.
And that's a really hard lesson to learn for people who are driven, right? Because you want things to be perfect. You want to do everything amazing. You are your own harshest critic. You want this, and you can say all you want, and you're right to say it, by the way, about, external validation doesn't matter. But of course, it's, it strokes our ego. It feels good. There's all that.
Well, and
So
if we're
it's
making
hard.
something for someone, it's like that means that, like, again, if you made a podcast and nobody listened to it and it was like, this thing sucks,
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
be terrible. But the fact that you made something that came from your center and it
Mhm.
came out of your mind and you were like, I find this subject so fascinating. And, to share with people, that's like such a powerful human thing, right? When you share with someone and it's well received. I mean, besides stroking the ego, I think it's just, there's something to that,
Yeah,
that's just a beautiful thing.
I think you're
Validation,
right.
maybe.
I think you're right. I was putting more the negative accent, and there's an
Okay.
element of it, but I think you're absolutely right. It's not just that. There is an element of fulfillment, and inevitably, you can tell yourself, hey, I'm really happy I created this thing. But if nobody else likes it, after a while, there's
Right.
an element that is like, we are social creatures. You want to have
Mhm.
the validation of your peers. You want other people to feel that you contributed something to, making other people happy in whatever measure makes you happy. It's
Mhm.
so yes, there is an ego element, but there's another one that doesn't have to be that dark. It's also just human nature, right? We
Sure.
like to the things that we create. We like them to have a positive effect. We like to make a difference in people's lives. So that's true too.
Mm.
And it's but yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard when I don't know if you have the same thing. Like, I tend to notice that the projects I care the most about
Yeah.
are the ones that somehow end up at the bottom of my to-do list,
Uh-huh.
because I'm scared. Reality, the reality
Mm.
is I'm scared to actually give it my all, and it doesn't live to my expectations. And then I'm like, oh, I failed, and I have to deal with it. So it's way easier to find 10,000. Oh, I should really work on A, B,
Uh-huh.
and C first. When you realize it's like, no, you don't. It's just you're scared to get to D because that one you actually care about.
Right. That's in the book The War of Art
Mhm.
with
Yep.
Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah.
That's like one of those books where, the big idea of resistance, and I have to fight against it, where same thing, it might be some thing I'm doing or whatever it might be, but it's one of those things where it's very, very important to me. It's meaningful to me. And so therefore I kind of get around to not doing it. And then I have to remind myself, like, this is the resistance with the capital R trying to, like, steer me away. I got to go do this. And then I go lock myself in a room, and then I'm like, all right, we're gonna knock this out.
That book is great. That book is absolutely, he nails it perfectly, what we all go through when we care about things with intensity. And we just had a thing recently. It was kind of funny in a psychotic kind of way, but sort of funny. Is I got so stuck on something I was writing, and I found every excuse in the book not to do it. And there
Yeah.
was, each day you feel worse because you get to the end. I'm like, I still didn't do it today. And then it's like, okay, tomorrow, and then you still don't do it. I got to a point after enough days where I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna just I'm gonna put my knife next to my computer. All I need to do is just get one line. Okay. I don't need to do anything major, but I haven't written one line in a month. I have what, 4 hours? Let's get one line in. If you don't sit down and get that done, you should go Yakuza style and chop off your. The thing is, like, you don't actually get to chop off your picking, because if you take it that seriously, of course, in 4 hours you're gonna
Of
write it,
course.
and that's
Yeah.
not even an issue. But is that commitment of going like,
Sure.
no, today there are no excuses. There is no, oh, but I had to do this other thing. Today you sit down and you just do it.
Yeah.
Or you can always chop off your pinky.
Yeah, yeah. It's that I don't know, because it's something that's so meaningful, right? That almost like exposes you a little bit. And if it's something that you value so much, and then maybe it doesn't take off, right? And
Mhm.
then it's just it hurts. It's
It does.
painful, right? And you want the things that matter to you to maybe matter to other people, and you
Mhm.
want them to appreciate them as much as you do, and hold them to this value system that you have. Is there something that you've created, maybe, that, or like a written a book, or even your podcast, that's kind of exceeded your expectations, and something that you've done that maybe has not, that you've kind of thought was going to be amazing and didn't take off?
Sure. I mean, it's weird, and that's where the external validation sometimes is odd because it seems a little random at times.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it
You know, I've
does.
had the things where, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love doing my history podcast. I love doing History on Fire, but I don't even think it's the best thing I've done. And that goes way better than most other things I've done, including some that I consider, man, that's my heart and soul right there. And people like it, but maybe the numbers are so dramatically reduced that you're like, huh, that's weird. But maybe it's not. You know what? It's like success is a very weird way to measure fulfillment because success
Mhm.
is dependent on so many different factors and you control only a few of them, where really a lot of it is luck.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of it, of course. You need to produce something that makes sense and it's good in some way. But there are so many ways in which that particular door that opened could have been closed, and that would have changed everything. And that same idea, same project, same drive, same everything would have not worked out the way it did. And so, in that sense, I think it keeps you humble because you realize that you can do all you want to ensure a certain outcome, but it's not all in your hands. There's an element where you just throw it out on a prayer because you don't know if it's going to work the way you want to or not. And you know, we like stories of empowerment where everything is about willpower and what we do and
Sure.
how hard we work and all of that. And don't get me wrong, that's you can't go anywhere without that. But that's like having the lottery ticket in your hands. You know, if you don't have the willpower, the discipline, the hard work, you don't even have the ticket.
Mm.
But just because you have those things, all you got is the ticket. And
Mm.
then you actually have to win. And that's a different story.
Yeah. Was there something, because you were talking about that you poured your heart and soul into something and it wasn't as received as much as some of the other things that you've done where you're like, I that was okay, but you guys love that, but then this thing's amazing and everything and you guys barely paid attention. Was there a particular project or thing that you did that you're thinking about when you said that?
Yeah, sure. So, for example, I wrote 4 books. The last one I did, it was a little more. It was kind of like was talking a lot about martial arts, but it wasn't just about martial arts. It was more. There was a more of a autobiographical feel in it in terms of dealing with fear, dealing with failure, dealing with loss, dealing with all of those things. The people who read it, they liked it, but they liked it the way I did, which was better than anything else I've done. But the
Mm.
numbers of people were dramatically shrunk compared to
Mm,
most other stuff I've done. And I was like, huh, look at that. That's weird, especially because I've had, even with books, like the first book I did, nobody knew who I was, and it did really well. This one, I
Mhm.
already had a big platform. If anything, I have so much easier for it to sell better, and it didn't. And yet people liked it, but just not that many people got it. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, this is what it is. At the end of the day, I
Sure.
loved it. I had a great time. The people I care about who read it loved it. So I was like, okay, it did its thing. It would have been nice to do it on a bigger scale. I wasn't disappointed with the result. Of course, you would like it to work out on a bigger level in some cases.
mm, yeah. Well, how do you recover from that? What do you do when that situation happens, when you have a
Yeah.
little bit of a disappointing outcome? How do you pick yourself back up and kind of get maybe motivation or inspiration to do it again or do something different?
I mean, I always have pretty much 10 projects going at once. I'm never doing one thing. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but regardless, it's like I tend to follow 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 projects at once. So sometime some most are not gonna hit because that's the
Yeah.
reality. Most are not even gonna see the light. But you throw a bunch of things out there, and if a certain number hits, you're doing great, and you are
Mm,
satisfied because okay, A, B, and C didn't quite work the way I wanted to, but D worked great. Okay, you're good. You're still fine. So in that sense, I'm not overly invested in any one thing, even though I may pour my heart and soul in it, because I'm also pouring my heart and soul in 2, 3, 4, 5 other things.
Mm.
And so if one doesn't work, it's okay. It sucks. I wish it did, but I don't have time to think about that one. I'm doing 4 more at the same time. I can't waste my time thinking about what could have been.
Yeah,
So I'm sort of driven on to the next one.
so you kind of maintain a level of detachment,
On some level.
towards the end result.
Yeah. Sometimes, and sometimes you get a bunch of things work at once and you're like, oh, wow, this is almost more than I bargained for. It's awesome.
Mhm.
You're satisfied, but you're like, oh, now this is a lot. And other times, by just random bad luck, they are all stuck at the same time. And you're like, oh, damn, this sucks. This is a problem. But of course, it's not going to last that way forever. It's like some are going to pick up, some are not. And it's an ebb and flow of things.
Mhm. So how did you get involved in martial arts?
So I started training when I was 17, shortly before I left Italy. I think one of the things we all like about martial arts is that sense of empowerment, that
Mm.
idea that you can work hard and you can gain a sense of self-confidence through it. And the reality is that nobody's just born with self-confidence. We are all we are all dealing with our own issues and our own insecurities and stuff. So I think that was the initial appeal.
Okay. What martial art did you train originally?
So I started out, let's see, I started out with a bunch of, you watch Bruce Lee movies. So you start out
Yeah.
with a bunch of Chinese martial arts
Okay.
and I enjoyed, I had my good time with it. I did my whole round of a bunch of Chinese martial arts. Eventually I started switching more toward combat sports and I did boxing, I did MMA, but I started focusing more and more on grappling.
Mm.
Probably because I just got tired of getting punched in the head.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's never fun. So I started doing that and I started focusing more on like judo, jiu-jitsu, things like that. But realistically, I like everything. You put any martial art in front of me, I'll find something I like in it, even the weirdest things. So I enjoy the process of being able to explore lots and lots of different things. And I think it got me out to, I was attracted to the fact that there's a concrete feedback there
Mm-hmm.
than just reality, right? It's like nobody cares how you can spin an argument or how flowery your speech is or how well you can. No, you either perform well or you didn't. You either get tapped or you don't. And I like that. I found it very mentally relaxing because it wasn't so, verbally you can argue anything
Mm-hmm.
and never get to a full resolution because that's just the nature of verbal disagreements. But with martial arts, it's very clear who wins and who loses, who does well and who doesn't. And I found that really just like, that's a breath of fresh air. I don't have to think so hard about it.
Yeah, there is something satisfying to having a clear-cut conclusion to the contest
Yep.
where, like you said, with a verbal argument, you could walk away and neither one of you guys agree about anything, and you're still sort of almost on edge.
Yep.
But with the physical fight of some sort, at the end of it, whether even if you're the loser,
Mhm.
it's done. It's over. It's very
Yep.
like there's a nice fine line there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I love that. Mentally, I find it so relaxing. The fact that there's a clear process, and then whether you screwed up or you did well, you can go back and look at the evidence and see what worked and what didn't. And again, that keeps you honest. That forces a level of honesty with yourself because you can now like the results are right there in front of you. So I really appreciate that aspect.
When did you begin training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
So I started out. It was kind of half-assed because a lot of it was a lot. Like it started, I believe, 2001, but
Okay.
there was very, rolling people garages kind of jujitsu where sometimes there's somebody who knows what they are doing and they show you something, but it's
Uh-huh.
not like you join a school and there's a curriculum and you follow. It was a lot of just rolling for the sake of rolling, and which in some way was great because it teaches you some things that are kind of unorthodox that you pick up that are weird and
Mm.
effective. But of course, you also miss giant chunks of the curriculum that you really should have, and you just skipped over because the methodology sucks because there's essentially no methodology or
Sure.
sit around. So I did that for a while, and then eventually I started getting a little more structured and started training in schools and stuff. And I always could. I always did it. The frequency changed because I knew from the get go that my life was never gonna be in a place where it's like, okay, I can train every day. I can be the guy who's on the mat 6 days a week. I'm like, yeah, I'm never gonna be that guy.
Mhm.
But I can be a guy who just keep doing it forever. So even if I'm training, when I'm lucky, I'll train 3 times a week. When I'm going through a shitty period, I'll go once a week. Most of the time, I'll go 2 to 3, somewhere around there. 2 to 3 for decades is still something. So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, maybe if that's the most time I can allocate, it's still worth it. It's still fun. So that's kind of was my attitude from the get-go. Is like, I know I'm never gonna be the guy who can become super good quickly because I'm not gonna have that dedication in terms of time. But I do enjoy it enough that I want to keep doing it forever, kind of thing.
So as a person that's, basically, which is, I mean this in no negative way.
Mhm.
You're a hobbyist, right? You get
Yeah,
into it, you play around. Um, a lot of people that get into jiu-jitsu have a hang up about this because, jiu-jitsu is very much it's a very competitive sport because we roll all the time. It has a very competitive nature to it. And, like one of the questions that I often get is, people that are struggling with this issue where they're training 2 to 3 times a week, which is absolutely ideal for their lifestyle.
sure.
But then they have, Bob over there who now Bob's training 5, 6 days a week, and then they start getting passed up.
Mhm.
And, again, it goes back to this thing of never enough. We always want more, right? That kind of thing.
Right.
Have you had to deal with any sort of struggles related to that where you're like having to remind yourself, saying like, okay, listen, yeah, Bob got better than me, but you know what? Bob's training, he's 20 years old or something, he's training 5 days a week. I'm over here. I've got all this other stuff going on. Have you ever had any struggles with that with the martial art?
I mean, I think it was always clear to me that is like the way I am is I'm always trying to do many things.
Mm-hmm.
And so inevitably, when your focus is spread over 3, 4, 5 things, you're not gonna get the same result as in a short run at least, as
Sure.
somebody who's focused on one thing only and they dedicate all that time. Of course, the specialist loses out on all the rest of life. The fact
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
that's their one thing outside of that context, maybe they are screwed. But if they stay in that context, they dedicated themselves enough that they are phenomenal.
Mhm.
It's a trade-off, right? You
Sure.
specialize in something, you will get good, but you're stuck to one thing. Or you can have, of course, there's also too many things where you spread your focus on 10 things and you can't because you're not getting any results. But spreading it on 3 or 4, I like it. I like being, okay, I'm pretty good at this. I'm really good at this. I'm not maybe the best at this or that, but I'm more than competent. I'm good at A,
Mhm.
B, and C. And I feel that for the way I look at the world, I tend to value it more, for me at least.
Mhm.
Somebody else may have different priorities and it's good for them. But for me, I feel that life doesn't speak one language. I like to be able to touch life in different ways, to touch it through a physical discipline like martial arts, to touch it through something more nerdy, or to have several ways in which, if I run into somebody who is just completely nerdy and has never done a day of physical activity in their life, I can relate to that with one part of me.
Mhm.
Then I also have another part of me that I can relate to other people with. And I have so that even if I'm in a room with somebody who only understands one language, I can speak that language decently enough to be in the conversation. I
Mhm.
value that. I feel that it gives me more for the way I'm built than if I were to do one thing and one thing only 24/7. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just how you're built. It's like for me, the variety is important.
Mhm. How do you get the most out? So I'm kind of the same way. When I started jujitsu, I was in my mid 20s, finishing up graduate school, and I knew like I didn't really know, but I wanted to be as good as I could be. I wanted to be the best.
Yeah.
Obviously that's a totally different ball game. Just the way the jujitsu's evolved and skill levels evolved.
Yep.
How do you get the most out of your training? The 2 to 3 days a week. I'm in the same boat. Uh, but how do you do it? What are some tips for maybe people that are listening that are maybe older when they're starting, or they have a career already and they can't devote 5, 6 days a
Mhm.
week, multiple classes a day to training?
I think sometimes the mental aspect of it and mental in terms of strategy, to have a game that you develop sometime when you're driving, when you're doing something else, and you're just thinking, okay, side mount, plan A, B, and C. Yeah, you know 10,000 techniques, but what are your go-to things? And have it very clear in your mind. You even visualize it when you don't have time on the mat. And so when you get in that position, you know exactly what your ABC is. You don't have to think about it forever. It's like, oh, what was that move that they showed me last week? What was it? Oh, I wanted to try it. No, it's super clear in your mind where you want to go. Some of it can be done as a mental exercise, as really just going over, because there are only so many places that you can end up in a fight, both standing up as well as on this, even more so on the ground. So to have a very clear game that you develop in terms of what your priorities are from each position, I find it very helpful. And then in terms of, I guess, where we are going earlier in terms of sneaky things that you can do with people who are putting more time on the mat than you are. So you're never going to be able to compete on the same level. Like I got hugely into leg locks way back in the day, like really like 2002, 2003, where most people weren't doing leg locks, precisely because I realized I'm never going to get a rear naked choke on a guy who trains 3 times as often as I do. I'm never going to get an armbar on a guy because they've seen that way too many times. I'm just going to try to take the game to that part of jiu-jitsu that they may have overlooked, that they are not as good at, because the reality is that I'm going to catch people in an armbar or in a choke if I'm better than them, or maybe if we are even. I'm not going to catch them if they are better, other than by random luck ones. Leg locks were the one thing that I realized I could catch people who were better than me in. And so I was like, well, since I have limited time to dedicate, if I'm rolling competitively, not for fun or when I'm trying to learn something, but when I'm actually trying to get a tap, I'm going to go to the one place that other people have overlooked and where I put more time in. And so I can even out the difference in how much we train. Of course, that was more true then than today, because today people train leg locks a lot. That there's much more understanding of the game and more people are competent in it. But still, considering how much time I put into just the leg lock game, the reality, even to these days, like if I'm going with somebody who's good, I'm either gonna catch them in a leg lock or I'm not gonna catch them at all. You know, so even if they are good at leg locks, it's still good for me to go there because the odds are as good as they are gonna be for me to compare to something else.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of fun. You know, I wanted to learn jiu-jitsu as a whole game. And, you know, I would practice my other things against lower level people, against same level people. But if I'm going with people who are better, it was just leg locks, leg locks, leg locks.
It's similar, Chewy, like, because you have this game plan that a lot of times people will get from you, and it's the same thing, right? You're teaching them like, hey, what's your ABC? Like, where are you going? That's having, that's a great strategy competition wise, but also just in general, if you're trying to develop certain things and then focusing on those things, regularly when you do get, like you said, you have efficient and like kind of focused practice. You have focused, you're not just going and learning whatever, you're kind of going in and you're focusing on certain techniques and trying to hone those in. So it's like you're studying and you're getting those reps in.
Yep, yeah. And, you know, you try the stuff you're not good at with people who are lower level. And then for the people who are higher level, you stick to the stuff you already do well until the other skills start increasing.
What other martial arts have you done? Is there some that are kind of fringe or unique or very different and maybe something of value that you've gotten from those?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I did early on I mean, for one, I do things even like I enjoy doing Tai Chi. I enjoy doing things that are kind of as far from the competitive combat sport kind of game as is possible.
I like Tai Chi.
But yeah, it's fun. It's great.
Yeah.
Give you great body awareness, gives you.
Mhm.
But like I also enjoyed there were, you know, one of the things that has happened as a result of combat sports is that people have realized that a lot of the stuff that emphasized more self-defense, more street fighting was lots of it was bullshit because it was predicated on the because that's the reality, right? It was
Yeah.
predicated on the fact that you're doing it on somebody who's not resisting. So it's like,
Right.
well, of course it works. However, I feel that sometimes in combat sports we end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater because the
Sure.
reality is that there are certain things that are useful in terms of outside of a sporting contest. where clearly if you only train that aspect, you're going to have the right techniques with the right targets, but you're never going to be able to pull them off because you didn't train with adrenaline, you didn't train with resistance. But I feel that combining them, you know, being good at combat sports, but also having an understanding of what it is to have tactics and ideas that are outside of the combat sports thing is very useful. Because I'm sure you guys have seen the same stuff. How many times have you seen even videos of people who are clearly trained grapplers who they are in a fight, they take somebody down, they mount them, you know, if they were in a cage, they are doing everything right. And then the guy on the bottom, his girlfriend walks up and she kicked them in the face and knocked the guy out. And you're like, you forgot that this was a UFC. You know, it's like there's a context in which technique works, and there's a context in which you need to tweak stuff. So I did find some of, like, I did a lot of this one art that was called Kung Fu Sun Tzu. That's very, you know, self-defense emphasis, and a lot of the guys who do it, they suck because they never sparred, right? So they live in their imagination of what they could do.
Mm.
But if you do it in addition to sparring and that in your combat sport training, then I feel that it does open up your mind to a different way of thinking, where the targets that you attack are different. The mentality is different. Because, you know, when you spar, even standing up, most of the time there's a give and take, there's a sense of distance. In self-defense, the distance is completely different. People crash into each other in the first 5 seconds. There is no playing the distance. So that changes the game completely. I find it useful to have at least a little bit of understanding of that game, of what it means to deal with multiple attackers, what it means to deal with a different kind of distance. I don't know. I find it, again, we tend to be very polarized in that. There are either the people who are combat sports are everything and self-defense sucks, or combat sports are bullshit. We do the, you know, master can kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel that there's room for both. I feel that there's some value to be found in both approaches. To different degrees, I tend to prefer combat sports, but I think there's a value in there.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, you're right, because I know that, like, when I first started jiu-jitsu in 2003, I remember my old coach, we had a shirt, and it was a jiu-jitsu shirt and had our team logo on it. And it said on the back, it said other martial arts only work in movies. You know, it was very antagonistic thing.
Okay.
You know, and I think it kind of maybe plays a little bit to human nature where, okay, now we have an enemy that we can unite against. And we, you know, like you said, it's polarized. Like it's us versus them, right? That's always kind of the common thing. But I think you're right. I think that sometimes some of these martial arts have things to offer. And even some of them where, you know, you'll see like different forms of those martial arts are trained differently. For instance, you can go to, you know, you can have like some garbage strip mall karate school, but then you can go and see some like guys do some like Kyokushin karate where they're really sparring. I mean, those guys are nasty. You don't want to stand up with those guys. They'll knock your head off. But it's a different way because of the way that they're training with it. But I think, you know, one of the guys I spoke to years ago, he said that like jiu-jitsu and combat sports, those make a great base. And then sometimes some of these like martial arts or even fighting systems that are focused solely on like self-defense stuff where a lot of it's theory, it's a good finisher where it's like you get different ways of thinking and different ideas of thinking. And because you have such a good base and you can deal with the stress, then you can take on these ideas and they're far more applicable because of what you've done already.
Yeah. I think if people care about martial arts for effectiveness, which is not a requirement because you can just have fun and do whatever, right? You can do this looks flashy and cool and I want to train that art. Cool, good for you. But if you care about kind of effectiveness, I really feel that both tracks are valid. I feel that combat sports should be primary, but I do feel that there are things that combat sports don't give you that you should train in thinking a little outside the box in a more self-defense type of scenario. And again, I kind of go back to the Bruce Lee approach of like, you know, you're not married to any one style. Styles all have their strengths and weaknesses. Some have way more strengths than weaknesses, or vice versa. But you can find something useful in a bunch of different places. And it's your job as an individual to collect what you find useful and use it for yourself so that the style serves the individual rather than individuality being sacrificed on the altar of the style.
Yeah, I think if you train purely self-defense, it's going to be a lot of theory,
Yeah,
right? Because you
totally,
can't.
totally.
We had a Chris Howder on the podcast, who's a black belt, and he said, "You think street, but you train sport. So
Yeah,
like you can think about the street, scenario, but also you have to train in a way that's not going to kill your body and break your body down. That's so there's different ways to train jujitsu, and also we have this discussion all the time. A purple belt, a competition purple belt or blue belt could probably take on and have their way with a pretty average person that doesn't have much training, and even if they just train a sport jujitsu.
yeah, for sure.
So I think that there is carryover there. You don't have to train just one style, and then because it can limit you. It can definitely limit you if you just train in a self-defense type environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's
Yeah.
it's really a trade-off because I mean, at the end of the day, every martial art is trying to replicate reality, but for safety reasons, because we all want to go back home with both our eyes and with everything
Yeah.
still attached. You cannot replicate reality, so we tweak reality a little bit by either putting some rules and the different methodologies. They each give you something. Going full powers against a resisting opponent with grappling is fantastic.
Mhm.
You don't take brain damage and you still get to go full on what it's like to throw somebody, to control them on the ground, to do this and that. Of course, it's not giving you thinking about, oh, this guy has a friend over there who can kick me in the head. So that you use a different methodologies to add that piece. Or you can, what about striking? How do we train striking safely? How do we, there are multiple different methods and they give you something useful. I don't think any one methodology is by itself it. Some are way better than others, for sure. There's no argument. But even the best methodology by itself is not the be all and all kind of thing. So I do enjoy trying different things.
So here's a fun question. I always think about this, and obviously you're a historian, so maybe this will sort of be something you've thought about before. Throughout history, martial arts have obviously existed for a long time. And you can at different time periods, even like when you think about, I always thought this was funny. You watch like a movie that involves like medieval knights and such, and from the lower Middle Ages or Middle Ages, whatever. And you see these like booklets that they found, these books to show what they were doing, and they were doing a lot of grappling a lot of times because they're encased in metal and you can't just whack them and get rid of them or whatever. But anyway, if you could take like the best martial artists now, how do you think that they would stack up amongst the different martial artists in the past? Like, as far as back as ancient Greece or whatever, do you think that they would be better because of the way that technology is and the way that we can share it? Or do you think those periods of time that we've simply just lost to history because we don't have the records and everything else, do you think there would have been martial artists there that would have been superior because they probably did it for reasons that they had to? There was a necessity element to it.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because in the sense of, yeah, that's a hard one, right? Because it's hard to picture what real life was like 2000 years ago, right? How much did these guys train? How
Right.
much, what did they do the rest of the time? Because if it's
Hmm.
kind of like, if you look even today, so forget the history, right? If today I don't know if you guys ever watch like Mongolian wrestling, right? Where
Yeah,
they
yeah, I've
get
seen it before.
together and you see these guys and sometimes even older guys who
Hmm.
forget mats, is just
Grass.
ground on the
Yeah,
prairies with rocks everywhere, and they throw each other full power on, and they get up
yeah,
and they are fine. And they're like, "How the hell are you fine? Any
yeah.
normal person would be dead by now. Why are you taking that fall?" And then you also see some of their lifestyle beside their training. And there's they have to literally hip throw horses, pin them to the ground to castrate them on a regular basis and control them on the ground. That's what they do as part of daily life.
Hmm.
That makes a difference, right? So it's not just what they do when they wrestle, is like, what do they do the rest of the time? Yeah, if you're hip throwing horses around, yeah, that's probably a bit different than the average person. So I think it's hard to tell because
Sure.
clearly we have access to more information today. We have more technique, we have access to better methodologies, more scientific understanding, but also there are certain aspects that come with a lifestyle that you really cannot replicate when you don't live
Mhm.
that lifestyle 24/7. So it's a hard one because it's I can see an argument made either way.
Sure. Yeah, it's just I figured it'd be a fun thought experiment, but yeah, I guess the element of the hard life. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you train, 3 hours a day or whatever, but then the rest of the day you're kind of relaxing in air conditioned,
Yeah.
whatever. Whereas this guy's living, on the steppes of Russia doing whatever, it's a little different.
Yeah, you see, like, speaking of Mongolia, I remember seeing pictures of like 4-year-old Mongolian kids galloping on horseback and shooting with bow and arrow. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, those are people who are both wired differently and grow up in
Mhm.
a culture where that's what everybody has done for the past 300 generations. They pick it up with their mother's milk, pretty much. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I can train archery all day long, and I don't know that I'm ever gonna match that.
Yeah, it's almost ingrained in their DNA. Like it's just it's like you have an athlete who has a kid and then they're an athlete or they're like
Right.
a basketball player. It's like it's almost like they're fed and bred into it essentially.
Yeah, it's there all the time. It's what you
Yeah.
do to play. Like, go play, meaning pick up hop on a horse and start shooting. It's like
Yeah.
different.
What you had mentioned Bruce Lee, and if I'm correct, I believe that you were kind of part of a Bruce Lee documentary a while back.
Sure. Yeah.
Have you done a pretty extensive amount of I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. Of course, I grew up watching Bruce Lee and of course Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chuck Norris movies and stuff. That's kind of my youth. About Bruce Lee, there's a lot of theory and maybe kind of mysteriousness about Bruce Lee. Like what do you know kind of about Bruce Lee through your studies?
Yeah, I ended up doing even a series about him. I did a couple of episodes, so they were actually long. It's probably like 5-6 hours total of like I did a Bruce Lee bio cover. So I'm super fascinated with him, both for the impact that he had on martial arts, which is kind of hardly second to anybody. You have somebody like Jigoro Kano, you have Bruce Lee. Those are the gods of martial arts in terms of the impact that they've had on public consciousness. But also, I've always been fascinated with Bruce Lee's philosophy. I always found his ideas, and don't get me wrong, a lot of his philosophy is derivative because most of those ideas tend to be from Taoist thinking.
Mhm.
But the way he adapted it to the modern world, the way he adapted it to being in US in the 1960s, early 1970s was just brilliant. So I really find his life story and his philosophy fascinating. That's why even when I thought I knew a lot, and then I did a deeper dive to prepare for the episodes, and I was like, oh, there's even deeper layer to go into, and so it's a lot of fun. I think he's one of those historical characters who he's just seriously larger than life. So it's there's a lot there to unpack for sure. One
Mhm.
thing I picked up in during the latest round of research that I that never picked up earlier on was his relationship with success. Because when
Mm.
you look at it, for a guy who grew up in Hong Kong when he did, to have the success that he did was just there was no way. It's like
Yeah.
winning the lottery 25 times in a row. It's like the odds were so stacked against being able to pull off what he did that it's beyond miraculous. And yet, one of the things that's interesting about the last little bit of his life is that he did not seem very happy. Like,
Hmm.
if anything, when he achieved everything he wanted, he felt more trapped than he had ever been. He felt he had less time for his family. He was constantly dealing with people on one end adoring him, but there was all this gossip in the newspaper all the time. There was the pressure of celebrity, of course. There was the fact that you don't know if he's gonna last because his success was so quick and so rising so quick, and then he died fairly quickly after that. He felt the pressure to say yes to every project that came his way because he never knew if he was going to last or if he was going to burn out in a few
Mm.
months. So it was interesting to read because on one end is this great success story. On the other end, there was a sad vibe to it because he was like, wow, this is somebody who achieved more than pretty much anyone can ever hope to pull off. And still, there was an element of feeling, oh, this wasn't what I was after. At the end of the day, this was not what I imagined it to be. And so there was kind of a cautionary tale that's tied back to where we started in terms of the knowing when to stop, knowing when to be satisfied. Because I remember when I was going through researching stuff and I was reading all these things and I was like, I did not see that coming. And it was the time I started doing the research at the time when things were going the best for me in terms of work. My podcast has gone better than ever. I got a great contract from a company. I had all these things going. And I remember talking with my girlfriend, and she was saying, you wake up and you start working. Then you work all day until everybody's asleep and you're still working. And then you start again the next day. That does not look like success to me. And I was like, you got a point. Yes, that is correct. It's like now I'm having the most success I've ever had, and I feel like I'm a slave tied to the wheel. What the hell is wrong with this picture? It's like it's good to work at things you're passionate about, but there's a point where it's like, Jesus, man, go to the beach, enjoy, relax a little, have fun. And so while I was reading the Bruce Lee stuff, I was experiencing this. And of course, my experience is like one millionth of the Bruce Lee experience. And I was like, there is something to this. Well, sometimes, whatever our idea of success is when we start, we may have to tweak it along the way because there are some adjustments that are needed to keep it in perspective, to actually still enjoy life and not just have all the, hey, I was number one at this, and that.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? It's like, yeah, but you're not living life.
Right. Well, that's like, is that like, that's like, I think it was Alan Watts. He was talking about like you spend your life climbing up the ladder. And then when you get to the top, maybe it was someone else, but I thought it was him. But then when you get to the top, you realize you're up against the wrong wall.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, that's not what I was. No, wait, I didn't want these. Let's trade.
Yeah. Well, and that's the same thing. It's the weird thing because when you start going into this new realm, this new project, or you start chasing success, you have ideas of what you want, but you become a different person in order to achieve it, and you have to do different lifestyles and everything else. And sometimes you're not actually aware of the exchange that has to happen in order for that to take place.
Big time. And I think it's very important to be able to tweak it. It's like, yeah, I still want this thing. It doesn't mean I don't want them. But let's tone it down 20%, because otherwise you burn yourself out, which ultimately is the Bruce Lee experience. He ended up burning the candles from 12 different ends and burning himself out, had luck and everything. But I mean, in some way you could almost see it coming, because he was like, he had lost a ton of weight. He was already a thin guy to begin with. So he was like down to nothing during the filming of Enter the Dragon. He felt this pressure of, he was working himself rugged to a point where, of course, there's the room for things to go wrong increases exponentially, because he pushed himself so hard long past the points where he would be healthy to do. And so, of course, the bad reaction to a medication or stress or heat stroke or whatever it is going to hit you way harder, because you have already gone long past the line of health. And I think in that sense, it's a bit of a cautionary tale about when people who are driven. It's great to be driven, but it's also, there's a point where it stops being healthy. There's a point where it just turns into just grind porn, where you just like, the grind, I need to keep going and doing this thing. And it's like, yeah, man, breathe. It's okay. Grind. Some people need that fire under their ass because they are lazy. But some people push too hard all the time, and they need the opposite. They need to be told, okay, tone it down 3 levels here. It's great that you push yourself, but maybe a little bit less in your case.
Well, and I think that, that reminds me of a period some years ago where I was in that mode, and I'm sure you've been there before, where, you get the ball rolling. So then I was waking up, 4 a.m, and sometimes I wouldn't be done until 11 at night. I'd go back to sleep, wake up, do it again. But I found that, as I delegated other jobs to people, and hired more people to do things, and then as I got more sleep, I was able to get like way more done in a shorter amount of time. Going back to your story, you're in Hawaii, you get 2 hours and you just knock it out. And the same thing happened for me, where I was like, well, if I sort of get this other side of my life to where like I'm enjoying everything. I seem to be way more amped up for work, and I get it all done when it needs to be done. And it's a much there's no hard. I mean, there's still work involved, and sometimes you got to grind a little bit. But I don't have to, what's the word? Be a tyrant to myself to get it all done.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, the big disease that we struggle with as human beings is the dualistic mentality, where it's black and white. It's you're either happy but lazy and doing nothing and just sitting there waiting for the coconut to fall in your hand, or you are this ultra-driven, tough person who then ends up being miserable because you burn yourself out.
Mm-hmm.
We always think in terms of, if you don't like capitalism, you must be a communist. If you don't like communism, you need to endorse the most ultra capital. It's like,
right.
Oh man, life is a little more complicated than that. It's like there's, I find it in everything, whether we're talking politics, philosophy, martial arts, training, energy management. Everything people tend to fall into these binary opposites, thinking that there's either one model that's right or the other, where the reality is that usually is a very yin-yang thing, right? There's something good on one side, there's something good on the other. It's depending on how you mix it together, where you can find a healthy balance. And the reason why we don't do it so much is because it's so much easier to go to black and white mentality, because you can apply it every time, right? It's always good to grind, or no, it's always good to be mellow and relaxed. It's always good. And why do we do it? Because that way we don't have to think about it so hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the answer is always the same. I don't even need to know what the situation in front of me is. The answer is always A. And it's like, no, man, you need to figure it out each time. You are a different person, at different circumstances in your life. The situation has changed, and you need to tweak that balance. What used to be good 80-20 one way, now you need to go 60-40 the other. Now we need to be 99-1.
That's always a challenge, but it takes effort. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes energy, right? And like, if you can apply one thing, one lens to everything, that makes things a lot easier, but it doesn't always make them quote unquote right.
Totally. And I think, and that's where even take something like Jiu-Jitsu, right? You think, I'm always going to sweep this way. And it's like, yeah, you work on 5 guys in a row, but then there's a guy who moves differently, who distributes his weight differently. It doesn't work if you do that. Now you need to adapt something else, and you have to change your game a little. And you find out that this other adaptation works better. Great. But falling into the dogma of it work in case A, B, and C, so it's going to work in every other case, is like, no, it doesn't. That's just not how life is.
Yeah. And it's hard to change that when you've been on one side for many, and you almost associate your being and yourself with being one way. Like, I'm the person that does this, or I'm a sport jiu-jitsu guy, or I'm a self-defense guy. You don't want to go to the other side, because it shows. Some people, it can show, I think that it's possible it shows intelligence and shows if you're able to adapt, but some people think it's weakness. It's, I guess, your perspective.
I think, and that's where, to me, like, if you apply to politics, for example, that's where I find myself disagreeing with pretty much anybody, regardless of their political disposition. I know I will disagree with them if I can clearly identify them with one label.
Yeah.
Because I find them that they are a slave to a dogma, whether it's a leftist dogma or a conservative dogma. At the end of the day, it's like, no, man, not every solution is found in one kind of thinking for every problem in the world. Sometimes, actually, those other guys turn out that there's an idea that works better in this context. And while maybe 80% of the time your model works better, it's not 100. So you need to tweak it. You need to have the humility to mix things coming from different sources, and to figure out what's valuable about them and what instead need to be left behind, which again, it's the Bruce Lee idea, right? He applied it to martial arts, but you can apply it to philosophy, to religion, to politics, to everything else. It's like, there is no one ideology that has every answer to every problem. That's just not how life works.
Right. And I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, where, with doing something creative, putting something out there, putting yourself out there with an original thought that you've come up with, that can be a scary place. And I think that sometimes with people, a lot of times it seems where, And again, this is obviously social media has kind of over exaggerated this to some degree because, again, I like all the stuff that I see on social media being really bad. I don't really see it much in my gym and everything else. Everybody's pretty cool and we're very different from one another. But, assuming but you get in there and you see like the comments and stuff, I think that a lot of times it's very easy for people not only to simply not think, because thinking requires energy and you have to think about like every little situation, but also, and we like to make things we do this to people.
Mm-hmm.
If I come to know you in a certain way, I want you to always be that way. Then all of a sudden, if you change, I'm like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Like, no, I'm a human being. I'm changing. We're all changing.
Yeah.
But I've come to know you in this way. But with that, people a lot of times want to, I think, forego their own ideas and just say, tell me what to think. Like, look at the TV. Tell me I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to research. Just tell me what to think. And whatever you think, that's what I'm going to go with. And, if you say something, I'll just go with that and whatever. Because if you say to, your particular party, well, yeah, I'm for capitalism and stuff like that, but I think we should have healthcare for everyone, right? Whatever. Like, oh, wait a second, then all of a sudden you were some socialist. Like, no, that's not where we're going, right? But that becomes the thing where
take them all over there,
right? And because things have gotten so polarized, it's like if you end up doing that, then you're stranded right in the center where most people are, but you're stranded in the center where it's like, well, they don't want you because you think you're a socialist and they don't want you because you like capitalism or what, just silly stuff.
If you're not that, you're this. If you're not this, you're that. And it's like, no, but that's not how it works.
No,
just because I'm not that doesn't mean I'm this thing over here. I could be somewhere in the middle, and that's the mixture of it. That's the beauty of it. Like we have consciousness and we have the ability to reason and discover like new things and learn, right?
But we like to be led.
Yeah.
Some people are sheep. Yes. It's what
everybody likes to be led to some degree.
Yeah, it's natural, right? Because life is hard. So we don't have the answers to a lot of things. No. The most self-confident person among us will have a lot of insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to have something that we can rely on 100% of the time. That's always there. So that's why cult leaders are popular. That's why dictators are popular. That's why dogma is popular, because it appeals to that part of us that kind of wants a daddy figure who tells you, don't worry, son, everything is going to be okay. We just follow the rule and everything is going to be good. And it's like, I get it. I understand. I very much sympathize with that need. Unfortunately, it leads to bad places, but I get where it comes from. It's so it's understandable. It is the way it goes.
Yeah, that's true. Daniele, so I have a fun question for you. Maybe you've been asked this question before. We'll end on this. Since you're a history guy, if you can take it a couple ways. If there is a period of history that you could go back and live in or meet someone in history, like is there some period that maybe you love studying about or that's just you're really infatuated with that you'd love to go and experience?
One thing that, and I'm not saying that this would be the greatest life because I don't know, but in terms of fascination, what I would like to see, I'm really fascinated with pre-agriculture hunting and gathering lifestyle 10,000 years ago or something, where what exactly did it feel like to be part of this tight-knit tribe, living off the land, living as nomadic hunters and gatherers? And I'm not romanticizing it. I'm sure there are 10,000 things that were problematic about it, but because that's ultimately what made us human beings. 90+% of the time we've lived as human beings, we live that way. I would like to see what that's like for real. And because everything else afterward essentially has been an experiment. Most of the farming civilization are like less than 10,000 years old. Our way of life with industrialization is a dot in time. So I'm curious to see that one thing that made the human experience it for the longest amount of time, what it would be like.
That's interesting. It's not what I expected. I thought you'd say like, "Oh, go be a knight or something." That's cool.
I dig that when the pandemic hit and I hadn't played video games in a million years, and I pretty much got a PlayStation purely and exclusively to play Far Cry Primal. It's set up as a 10,000 years ago video game, and
that's cool.
Give me a taste of that, made up, whatever fiction, but still fun.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And if people want to get some of your books or get a little more information, see what you're all about, what podcast, can you tell us about your podcast a little bit and what books you have and where they can find that information?
Sure. So once you manage to the complicated task of spelling my name with all its many L's in there correctly, if you Google that, lots of things show up. So the books, I have 4 of them on Amazon. There's a podcast I'm doing, History on Fire and the Drunken Taoist. Drunken Taoist is more like a chatty podcast, interviews, things like that. History on Fire is me doing a deep dive into one topic in history at a time, whatever strike my fancy at that particular period, and I heavily research. There's some of History on Fire behind the paywall, but probably not for long. And even there's so much that's not behind the paywall. There's like 50 plus episodes of 2 hours each that are not. So by the time you catch up with all that, you are more than, things will have changed by then. So there's a lot of free stuff out there. And so yeah, podcast, books, I'd say those are the main things.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show with us.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I hope you guys, got something from it. Again, I had fun with that when I know you did too. It was fun.
That was so much fun.
It's fun talking to people. Like there was something that he talked about where he was talking about, experiencing like lots of different stuff in life. And to me, when I think about that, because I've had that idea myself, because when I was younger, I used to be like just jiu-jitsu. I literally ate, slept, breathed it. That's all I did. I mean, like my life was dedicated to it. As I get a little bit older, I like diving into other things because it gives life a certain color to it.
Well, that's a great point. It's like seasons, right? You have seasons to your life. Like you had that time when you first started training, maybe when you're like, I want to be an MMA fighter. I want to do this. I want to make my living doing jiu-jitsu, MMA, martial arts. And now you've got, you've transitioned, you're getting older. Obviously competitions are going to be a little different, maybe not as frequent.
Sure.
And they maybe have a special place in your heart, but they're not as at the forefront of who you are as as a martial artist, possibly. So.
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. This is the way I see it. Because when you know more information, when you know stuff, and again, I'm not talking about superficial bullshit information from like I read a headline. I'm talking about like when you really come to know some information of some sort, like when you really understand it. It's like having black and white vision, or black and white vision, like being colorblind. Excuse me.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? I was thinking of like a black and white TV when I was a kid.
Yeah.
We had that black and white TV, and you can only see grays and whites and blacks and stuff. And then imagine all of a sudden you can see reds. Oh wow, we can see reds now. And then all of a sudden now you can see blues, and you can see different colors. You get a wider expression, or if you want to, you can think about the fact that our available knowledge, it's like being in a dark room and having a light down. That light shining down, that's our available knowledge. And the more that you gain through your life and through the wisdom that you experience as you get older, it's like having another light click on. Oh, shoot, I can see it over there now. And so I've found enjoyment by taking the same sort of skills that we use in jiu-jitsu as far as the perseverance and sticking with something and everything else, and just putting those in other areas.
Those common threads that you have, that have gotten you to the point in jiu-jitsu or in success on the YouTube channel. Like and
you dive into other stuff,
right? Use it towards everything else, and you expand your mind, and your skills.
So it sounds like expand your mind and your skills, kids. That's why you don't do drugs. I felt like I was getting like a after school PSA right there.
That's probably how I talk to my children all the time. That's probably why, giving them motivational statements all the time.
But come on, kids, expand your mind and your skills.
This is why I try not to talk very much.
Oh, stop it. I'm having fun with you.
Chewy's having fun. Watch out, everybody.
Yeah. All right, guys. So hope you enjoyed the podcast today. As always, thanks to the sponsors, Charles Webb. You can check them out at charleswebb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off. Again, I encourage people to try out one of their tinctures of oil, where you can just take a couple drops or take a little dropper at night or whenever you want to. But try it out. Give it a whirl. See what you feel in a month. Everybody's endocannabinoid system is different. Everybody responds to supplements slightly differently. But if you're like most people, if you look up the anecdotal evidence and you look up some of the stuff that they can say that it's done because of the FDA regulations, it's pretty incredible stuff. And I've had really amazing benefits for myself. So it's something I enjoy sharing with people, both people like you and people, if you're one of my students. I share it in the gym as well. And so check it out. Also, thanks to Epic Roll, rollbjj.com. If you're in the market for some gear, rash guards, shorts, anything jiu-jitsu related, you can get some quality gear with cool designs at epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Easy investing doesn't have to be intimidating. In fact, accessible investing happens every day on the Acorns app. Acorns takes your spare change from your daily purchases and invests it into portfolios that can grow with time. On average, Acorns users invest $490 a year just from spare change alone. Start putting your spare change to work and get a bonus $20 with an investment of $5 from you when you sign up at the Acorns app by going to acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com. And guys, if you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. I'll leave it at that. If you want more details, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast for more information.
We got some cool, a good little conversation with Daniele right before the podcast started. It was a little political in nature, but it was really cool. It kind of asking his perspective on kind of what he thought was going on and maybe some parallels to some other things in history. So leave that out there.
And guys, if you want to join the Chew Crew email list and get access to 3 free ebooks as well as my daily email, you can do so by going to jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up to the Chew Crew email list, trouble speaking today, you'll get, I think it's because I'm getting hungry at this point.
Oh,
so if you guys don't know this, as soon as we're done podcasting, I immediately go and eat because it's like, I haven't had food since, because the smoothie,
oh my gosh,
the smoothie place was packed today, so I couldn't make it. So let's see, I haven't had food. Man, it's been a long time.
Well, let's get you fed, sir.
Yeah,
let's get you fed.
It's been like 5 hours.
Let's get you a little thimble of whiskey first. Get you started.
No, that'll be bad because
that'll be great.
Little thimble of whiskey probably get me drunk.
I get a bang for your buck, sir.
I like last week when we got back from the thing that we did with the rock band thing. I don't want to talk about
the rock band. We saw a rock band.
We rolled with a rock band. I'll talk more about it later. But the
is so vague, but okay.
Use
your imagination.
I went and had like I measured out. I had like 1.5 ounces of bourbon, bro. It hit so
dude.
hard.
I was this morning at class.
But by the way, guys, jiujitsu.net/join. Join up, get some ebooks
right there. Ebooks right there. So for this morning, for some reason, we were just talking about I don't know how we got on this topic, but you being a lightweight.
Oh yeah,
we always talk about that for some reason. We were talking about this morning, and I was like, yeah, it's like an anomaly. Like he's like this big dude, but then he takes a sip of alcohol, and you're like, what's going on with that guy? Like, what happened? It's like somebody who spiked his stuff, who dropped a little something in there. I don't know what people were dropping there, but whatever they would.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much for me to get
so much fun though.
It doesn't take much for me to get a little buzz. Because I never developed a tolerance.
Well, and some people just naturally aren't very tolerant of alcohol. And we were talking about what
now if I have a full stomach, I can have more.
Well, sure.
But when I have an empty stomach and I've been doing stuff all day, and then dude, it's like
you just streamline it right in.
It just goes right in there. Yeah, streamline it.
Anyway, that's fun. Yeah, guys, thank y'all for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having us, guys. For having us
out
in your car, having us in your ears.
Maybe. Okay, I don't know.
Well, we're in their ears. They're listening to us.
They might be listening to us on the toilet right now, Chewy. How do you feel about that?
They could be
thanking them for that.
Could be in the shower.
I've
got this
shower radio.
Yeah, shower radio.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
It's just killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Showering and listening to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast.
All right, guys, we're done.
We're out of here.
Thank you guys for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.